And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us now, and it's been too many months, our friend Jill Wine-Banks, a former Watergate prosecutor, served as General Counsel of the United States Army when she was appointed by President Carter, author of books, including The Watergate Girl, which I interviewed about her in the past, and co-hosts two podcasts, Sisters-in-Law, she co-hosts that one, and Just the Facts. And nice to see you, Jill. A lot to cover. How are things?
Everything is awful in the world, but personally, everything is fine.
Good. That's good. It's got to have this compartmentalization, because if Trump and everything bleeds into all of our lives, it's not healthy. So let's talk about something. It's very interesting. There was a lot of press early in the week where in James Comey's case, Lindsey Halligan, who Trump had appointed to be essentially U.S. attorney there, had this screw up with the indictment and didn't present they got a no bill on the first charge. That means they got no indictment. The other two they did, but they didn't present a new indictment to the jury. And I've never done grand jury work, so I had no idea. All this was new to me. I'm reading about it. People are like, that's horrible. And she tells the judge on Wednesday, that's what happened. And in writing, they said they did not give the new indictment. Then yesterday, the DOJ reversed itself in writing and go, no, we did give it to him. So this makes it even worse on some level. I don't know what is going on. I mean, she doesn't know what's going on. To tell a judge in open court and to put in writing that you did one thing, and the next day the same DOJ you work with says, nope, it's the opposite. So I don't know what's true and what's not now. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, we never know what's true in this administration because most of it isn't. But this is an extraordinary gas-producing situation, and it is based on the total lack of competence and inexperience and the wrongness of Lindsey Halligan being the U.S. attorney for any district, let alone one that is doing things like this. And it's in the context of Donald Trump saying, do it, right, and her doing it, and the legitimate prosecutors saying there is not sufficient evidence, we will not do it. So they get fired. And then no one in the office will work with her. So she's alone in the grand jury. So if something is wrong here, it is solely her fault and could lead to dismissal because there wasn't, this goes to whether she's even legitimately appointed, which in my opinion, she is not. Now, in terms of grand jury, it's really, I think people are pretty interested in what really goes on. Right. So a prosecutor is the only person other than the grand jurors and the stenographer who takes the notes in there, except for the witness. In this case, it appears that only one FBI agent testified and that he may have made an error in revealing some attorney-client privileged material that would have been inappropriate. And she probably didn't even know it because she doesn't know enough about the law. She presented an indictment that had 3 counts, and the grand jury said, no, we don't like that one. So instead of redrafting in some way, or even just having the same indictment, and maybe it is, we don't know, the same indictment as the first one, minus count 1 that was rejected, and then going back into the grand jury, showing it to them and having them take a new vote on whether they liked this one. Right. She appears to have maybe had just the foreman of the grand jury look at it, sign it, and then she signed it and took it to the judge. The judge and this, by the way, was a magistrate judge who handles preliminary matters, very cleverly looked at it and saw the transcript and said, doesn't seem like there was enough time in between you're leaving the room after the rejection and coming back for you to have redrafted and represented the indictment. And so what's going on here? And that was something that not every judicial officer would have noticed. But as a result of that, it turned out, yeah, we didn't go back to the grand jury. We didn't show them this new indictment. And we in this country, under our Constitution and our laws, do not try anyone except for a felony, except after a grand jury indictment. And that means you present evidence and the grand jury evaluates it and votes on whether the laws that are alleged to have been violated have in fact been violated. That doesn't seem to have happened here. It also appears that she mistook the law in advising the grand jury on several issues. She basically said that Comey had the burden of proof, which of course is exactly the opposite. She suggested several other things that just don't coincide with our laws. And there's plenty of grounds for now dismissing it. And there is a law that most people aren't aware of that allows, even though the statute of limitations runs,
Mhm.
they have 6 months from the dismissal to reindict. So it isn't with prejudice, meaning they can't reindict. They could, but so far they can't get anyone who works in the Eastern District of Virginia's U.S. Attorney's Office to agree to indict except for her. And I think she will be thrown out for having been improperly appointed.
And I think you made a great point there, because a lot of people in commentary on cable news have said, well, the statute of limitations is run, and it did. The deadline, I believe, was September 30th, that they can't go get a new indictment. And I wondered, I asked one lawyer, is there no tolling? Like, you went in and you tried and there's dismissal. And this lawyer said, no, not that I'm aware, but you're saying yes, there is. And it makes more sense to me that there would be, to be blunt.
Yeah, they obviously were pushing to get this indictment returned before the statute ran. And had they not done that, it would have been over. So they did get it. And there is a rule that says when it's not on substantive grounds, but on procedural grounds that you are dismissed, you can cure the defect. Now, the question is, can they cure the defect? They would have to have a properly appointed U.S. attorney who actually knows something about grand juries. This was her first time in front of a grand jury. It's not a surprise that she screwed up. She did. But, you know, U.S. attorneys get a lot of training. Assistant U.S. attorneys, DOJ employees. I didn't go into a grand jury for the first time right out of law school and think I knew what I was doing. I assisted experienced prosecutors first. I learned my way around. I knew what I had to do in front of a grand jury. I knew what the rules were. And obviously, she didn't.
She didn't even know the law. I mean, what you also mentioned, something that the sort of in the corporate media, they're kind of missing, because I read the magistrate's opinion. There were twice that the grand jury asked her questions and she gave them incorrect information as a matter of law. One was about
the Fifth Amendment. Yeah.
The idea, oh no, he's got to testify. And then secondly, oh, we have more evidence than this.
Right.
Like, what that's ridiculous. Why would you think then you could indict anybody? That means that would be able
she reassured them, don't worry, there's plenty more evidence than what you've seen, which is saying to the jury, well, listen, just go ahead and indict. We need this. We need it now. Do it. We'll have better evidence at trial. No, that's not how it goes.
Ridiculous.
You do not need, and I should point this out, you do not need to present all of your evidence. You don't have to present your best case. Normally, you would have witnesses come in to make your best case because you want to get them pinned down so that they don't change their testimony later. Because a lot of times the people testifying are not FBI agents. They're the people who were co-conspirators, and they might get pressured to change their mind. So you would, but you don't have to. You can, in Watergate, we had subpoenaed 9 tapes. We got 6 because one had a gap and 2 were missing. But after the indictment, we subpoenaed 64 additional tapes. So there was plenty more evidence, and one of them was the smoking gun tape. That's perfectly legitimate to get more evidence as you're preparing for trial. So you don't have to present everything, but you have to present enough to get the grand jury to think there's probable cause for indicting. And in this case, we don't know, I don't know, because I haven't seen the grand jury transcript, which the magistrate judge has ordered be turned over to Comey. The government has appealed, so as of now, I don't think he actually has the full transcript. That's an unusual event, but it's necessary in this case. I mean, everything about this is so messed up from the very start of the Truth Social posting that should have been private to Pam Bondi from Donald Trump saying, what's going on here? Indict these people. And, it's really an abuse of government. They have a weaponization czar at the Department of Justice. Well, he should have been looking at this administration, not the past administration, because this administration is projecting its own wrong conduct on past administrations.
I agree. And I'm chatting with our friend Jill Wine-Banks. And then Jill, in the sea of this controversy and bad press, Lindsay Halligan goes to the New York Post to give her side of the story. So you have, and we all used to hear Merrick Garland all the time, our pleadings will speak for us. Not her. She goes there and is critical of the judge for his comments to her about asking, are you a puppet of the administration? And she suggested it violated the rules of judicial canons that say you're supposed to be patient and respectful to litigants and jurors and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, if you're upset with a judge, you could say something to the judge, but to go to the New York Post and give an interview is beyond me. I don't know what is going on anymore.
Well, apparently the administration doesn't believe in the rule of law. It doesn't believe in the norms of prosecution. It is totally abandoning the U.S. Attorney's Manual and all the rules that should apply for good reason. These are not bars to proper proceedings. They are implementers and enablers of justice. And we're losing that. And it's not just in this case, it's in blowing up ships at sea. Yeah. It's, you name it, they're doing things that absolutely are clear violations of the law.
And we're going to get that. And in fact, I want to ask you, and especially because you were General Counsel for the United States Army in the Carter administration, what is your reaction to the 6 Democrats, most of them military veterans or served intelligence community, making a video, including Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, saying to the military members, our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders. And Chris DeLuzio from Pennsylvania, rep, said, well, you must refuse illegal orders. Not the reaction part. We'll talk about Trump's reaction in a second, but from a legal point of view, can you tell people like what are the obligations for active duty military members?
Absolutely. As General Counsel, I supervised the JAG Corps. I supervised the Corps of Engineers, the DARCOM, which is the procurement branch as well. And so I'm very familiar with the laws. And it is very clear that you must obey a lawful order. You must disobey an unlawful order. That is absolutely clear. Now, the question becomes, who tells you whether it's lawful or not? Mm-hmm. Normally, it would be what's called the TJAG, the Judge Advocate General, who is the head of the JAG Corps and each service has their own. So the Army has a TJAG, the Navy has a TJAG, et cetera. But they were all fired. They were all let go. So right now, the TJAG is I don't know any of them. They may all end up being really credible people, but one would have to say, I'm suspicious that the people newly appointed are puppets of Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, that they are not giving legitimate advice. The head of the Southcom, which is the organization that's blowing up ships, the command that's blowing them up, has resigned early. One has to be suspicious that it's related to his belief. There's also now reporting that I haven't personally verified, but is from very credible sources, that the TJAG for Southcom said this is not legal. The OLC at the Department of Justice has now issued an opinion, much like their opinion that they could use waterboarding and other torture methods, and that would be legal. Obviously wrong. They issued an opinion saying, oh, it's legal. Everything we're doing is legal under US and international law. That's not true, and our allies are turning against us. And I want to point out that the normal procedure would be the Coast Guard would intercept a boat nearing our waters.
Right.
And by the way, the Coast Guard now has said that swastikas are only divisive. They are not hate crimes. And so it's okay for someone who's a bunkmate with a Jewish Coast Guard member or whatever to put up a swastika. I mean, that's more than divisive to me, but okay, that's a different issue. That the Coast Guard would stop the boat on probable cause, would enter the boat, would search the boat, would seize any contraband if they found any, would arrest the people on board, would bring them to America for trial, and then they would not be able to execute them because drug crimes are not a capital offense in America. They are preempting all the due process, and they're just killing people. They are murdering these civilians. There's no evidence that they were armed on those boats. There's no evidence that they had drugs on those boats. And now they're preparing for a land invasion, which actually, I was general counsel of the Panama Canal Corporation also as part of being general counsel of the Army. So I'm very familiar with Panama. And this happened in the Reagan administration, not while I was general counsel. We did arrest the president of Panama, Noriega, who had been indicted for drug offenses. And he was arrested, he was brought to America, he was tried, he was convicted and jailed. So, if our goal is to arrest Maduro, who has been indicted, and many people don't realize that, but he has been indicted in America, that's legal, that's legitimate.
Sure.
But invading Venezuela for drugs, and to stop them from getting to America, and by the way, they're saying it's fentanyl, which comes from Mexico, not from Venezuela. So this is all completely wrong, factually and legally and morally.
Right. I mean, and that I think is part of what prompted these members of Congress to put this up, as well as concerns about using the military in our streets. But, and this got so little coverage by corporate media, but UN High Commission for Human Rights at the end of October put out a big analysis of why this is illegal. And I'm going to read one line that is very, very clear. It says, under international human rights law, the intentional use of lethal force is only permissible as a last resort against individuals who pose an imminent threat to life. And if that is the legal standard, and I'm sure it is, the idea of killing people thousands of miles from our shore who may or may not be coming here,
Right.
They're not an imminent threat. NBC just reported this week that of the airstrikes, they mainly were involved people moving cocaine that was going from South America to Europe, not coming to the United States in any event, but that doesn't matter. Even if they were bringing fentanyl here, they were thousands of miles from the US,
Right.
and just to exterminate them, extinguish their lives like it's a video game. Is there any scenario you could see this is legal? I cannot believe this is justifiable.
I agree with you completely. I don't see it as legal, as justifiable, as moral. And that, again, goes back to that question of, is this a lawful order? And should soldiers, sailors, drone operators say, I will not do this? There is no Nuremberg defense. We know that from the Nuremberg trials. You can't say, I was just following orders. And it's clear that in training, you find out that you must determine if it's a lawful order. That puts the people on the ground or in ships at great risk as to finding out whether or not it's lawful and whether or not they are killing civilians. There's no evidence that these people are other than civilians, even if they were narco traffickers. They're still civilians. There's no evidence that they're armed. There's no evidence that they are engaged in an armed invasion. And our laws are very clear as to the need for an armed invasion or threat to America in order to justify this. You cannot say this is a war against narco traffickers and we're therefore going to do it. A war on narco traffickers would be arresting drug sales in America, sellers in America.
Right.
It isn't shooting in international war. These aren't in our waters. And as you say, they might have been headed for Europe. They may have been headed for who knows where, Canada, anywhere. We don't know that they were coming here. We don't know that they had drugs. And if they did, they're polluting the oceans, by the way. I mean, if there happened to have been drugs on and the fish eat it, are we going to get sick? I'm told by an expert in water from our water district in Chicago that the best defense to pollution is dilution, and the oceans will dilute. What I was worried about.
We won't have like
to Deborah Shore.
kind of whale hopped up on cocaine and that kind of like killer. It'll be like the Cocaine Bear movie they had. So it'll be like the cocaine
that's
whale,
so funny.
the cocaine porpoise, and it's all hopped up and it jumps on your ship and it's looking to eat. Not good. So with that backdrop about Donald Trump whimsically and illegally killing people, we get to Donald Trump yesterday slamming the Democratic members of Congress, saying, quote, it was seditious behavior, punishable by death. That's what he wrote. And then he reposted someone saying, hang them, George Washington would. But Donald Trump writing what the Democrats said was seditious behavior, punishable by death. He's calling for the execution of members of Congress for saying something he didn't like. And what is your reaction to this?
They are saying what the law is.
Right.
There was nothing they said that was not 100% a quote of existing law. and proper warning to the people on these ships that are blowing up the boats in international waters. I think it is, and it's also informing Americans about this. And of all the horrible things he has said, certainly hang them is right up, or reposting the hang them, and that it's sedition, which it clearly isn't. All you have to do is, sedition requires a war, not what's happening here. But it almost pales in comparison to quiet, quiet piggy. That has to go down along with I grab pussy because I can,
Right.
as two of the most horrible things he has said. Although death threats are probably pretty good. And I think that security is being ramped up on the 6 members who
It is.
did this, who are very experienced in the military or intelligence and know that these are the rules. And if any member of the military needs to be reminded, it's a good reminder, and for Americans to realize how bad what is happening is.
And I'm chatting with our friend Jill Winebanks. Jill, as a practical matter, if someone is in active duty and they're listening to this show, or they have a family member in active duty, and they actually think they got an order that's illegal, which is asking them to commit a crime, as a practical matter, what do they do?
That's why I said they're in a very tough position. And let me make an analogy. While I was general counsel, a union tried to unionize the Army. And I mean, it was sort of, I laughed when I thought, okay, so you get an order to take that hill and you go, wait, I have to talk to my union steward first and find out if I have to do that. I'm on a lunch break. Obviously, that's ridiculous. And there are circumstances in which orders have to be obeyed. And, you know, we go back to Vietnam, where civilians were being killed and people were tried for murder, because that's what it is. There are some things that people, I mean, you know that murder is wrong. And unless you're being fired upon, when you approach a boat, why don't you just stop the boat and see what's there? But what do you do if your commander says you must launch this missile, you must shoot this drone? Because it's not clear to me exactly what they are using. Maybe it is to you, what they're using to explode the ships that they are blowing up. But you're in a tough position. And as I said, normally the JAG for your commander would be available to advise you. But if you're in the middle of the ocean and in international waters, not even near our shores, you know, what do you do? Do you email the JAG? And do you, in this day, trust the JAG? Do you go to the ACLU or to one of the veterans organizations that might be advising, or some of the lawyers? A lot of lawyers have banded together and formed organizations to help people protect against Donald Trump and all of the wrong things he's doing. A lot of law firms are doing pro bono. I was a partner at Jenner and Block, who fought the efforts of the Trump administration and refused to cave, and continues to do good pro bono work. I'm not exactly sure what I would tell someone, but I would say you can be court-martialed for not obeying a lawful order. You can be court-martialed for obeying an unlawful order. You are in a tough position. The best thing to do is to get advice before you ship out. And there's internet on these, ships. So do your best to get some advice on whether you have to fire on an unarmed boat that may or may not be carrying drugs. If they were, why has there not been a presentation of some evidence to support this?
Right.
Why haven't they fished out the drugs? And why, in the case where 2 crewmen of the blown up boat survived, they were picked up, they were put on the ship, our ship, and then they were released back to their home countries? Why weren't they brought here and charged with a crime if, in fact, they were guilty of a crime? You tell me that that isn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt that this is not about interdicting drugs. This is about power. It's about something completely different than what is being said by this administration.
And last thing, Joe, because now we're 10, 11 months in, it feels like 10 years.
Oh,
But when you compare, you were a Watergate prosecutor. I may have asked you this a long time ago, but now we're 10 months in. It's simplistic, but who's more lawless, Richard Nixon or Donald Trump?
There is no question in my mind. Richard Nixon believed in the rule of law. When a court ordered him to turn over documents, he fought that. He said, no, I'm going to give you a compromise proposal, the Stennis proposal. But when the political consequences, when people started protesting, he said, okay, I'll give them to you. And when the Supreme Court said to the 64 additional tapes, you have to, he did, knowing full well that he would be proved guilty by those tapes. And first of all, let's say the underlying crime of a burglary at the DNC is a laughably unimportant thing compared to, for example, the cover-up of the Epstein files. It's a very different thing. And blowing up ships at sea, very different than anything. Well, maybe not, because there was bombing in Cambodia and other things. There were plenty of bad things. And the DNC break-in wasn't the only one. There was the break-in at Ellsberg, who had released the Pentagon Papers at his psychiatrist's office looking for stuff that could be used to blackmail him, which they did not find. And so there is plenty of bad stuff that Nixon did. But I have to say the fire hose of wrongful conduct that's going on now. We mentioned the swastikas, saying that swastikas are okay, barring certain press from the Pentagon. There's just so much wrong. And if I had children, I would be ashamed, because I was raised to believe in the honesty and integrity of the presidency and whoever held that office. And now, even after hearing Richard Nixon on tape saying, yeah, I can cover this up, I'm shocked by what I'm hearing. It's so much worse. And this is so much more evil. I feel, honestly, Dean, like I am in 1939 Germany, and one right after another is happening. I live in Chicago, where the ICE agents have been engaged in horrible violence. They have taken American citizens and pulled them from their cars because they're trying to alert immigrants by blowing whistles. And they have beaten them up. They have pepper sprayed my mayor, the mayor of Evanston, who is my favorite candidate for the Congress, taking the place of Jan Schakowsky, who I totally adored as a member of Congress. He was pepper sprayed. Another candidate for that office was arrested for interfering in ICE operations, none of which is true, of course. Mm-hmm. These are horrible things. They terrified children on Halloween Eve while they were trick-or-treating. They had more than a half a dozen armed, camouflaged, masked ICE agents showing their guns to children who were trick-or-treating. This is not an America I want to live in, but I am staying to fight. I will not get, that's why I'm wearing this resistance pin. Everybody should be wearing a paperclip like they did in Norway during World War II, to show you're part of the resistance, that you believe in the rule of law and democracy, the Constitution. And let's get the election in another year, still a year away, must go. But even if we have a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, their laws, anything they pass, will be vetoed by Donald Trump. So that's not enough. We have to, unfortunately, wait until 28 and win that election too.
Well, Jill, I'm going to thank you, my friend, for spending a chunk of time with us. It's so nice to see you. And if people want to follow your work, what's the best place now to check out?
So, well, I have a website, jillwinebanks.com. So that's one place. And I do post on every single outlet, everything from Blue Sky. I still post on Twitter or X, but also Threads and LinkedIn and Instagram sometimes. And we, of course, we always post hashtag sisters-in-law and just the facts on various media, so you can listen to those episodes.
Thank you, Jill. I really
Thank
appreciate it, my
you.
friend. Have a good Thanksgiving. I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.